We've offered many, many processes to help you move up the emotional scale. But today, we're just asking you to reach for satisfaction, but to do it when you're not too far away from it. In other words, first thing in the morning, it's easier to find satisfaction than maybe a little later in the day. Meditation is the most powerful process we know, because when you quiet your mind, you stop thought. And when you stop thought, you stop resistance. And when you've quieted your mind, then satisfaction is really easy to find. You know, there's so much more that's in your vortex than has manifested that we don't know why you bother at all with what's already manifested, because it's so scanty. Where you're going is where it all is, and where you've been is like gum that you've chewed the flavor out of. Even where you are, your attention to what is what keeps you from moving where you want to move. So it's interesting how if you're focused upon something that you like where you are, and you are satisfied, then you're not blocking, then you're not causing any resistance. But it's so much more productive to be turned in the direction of what's unfolding and feeling satisfied even before it's unfolded. That really is the key that you are looking for happy ever after and for magnificent, successful expansion. That's the feeling that you're wanting to isolate. We want you to identify a feeling of satisfaction and isolate it, meaning focus on it and notice when you've got it and when you don't, and then observe what that brings. Esther sat, once we began talking about satisfaction in this way, she sat for an hour or so after meditation and thought about moments in time when she was certain that she was feeling satisfaction. And she tried to recall what the components were, and she remembered several moments where she just felt satisfied, where the feeling of satisfaction was obvious, where there was no question. And it was simple things, like she remembered being by herself, getting out of the car at Crater Lake. It had been snowing. She hiked up this bank on a bright, clear blue day and saw the lake for the first time, and felt a feeling of satisfaction. It was like being in the right place at the right time. It was about everything converging that was wonderful all at once. Now that was a really extreme moment of satisfaction. Satisfaction on steroids, really. You could call it satisfaction into ecstasy, but it was satisfied. And then she thought about the feeling of slipping into a seat at a restaurant with friends in an environment that's comfortable, in anticipation of the food and the conversation, and the feeling of satisfaction of just being there, slipping in, taking her sunglasses off, taking a look at them, feeling appreciation for them, holding the menu, anticipating what they were all going to experience. Satisfaction. She began identifying and isolating, sort of trying to milk the feeling. And then she began noticing in real time moments that were satisfying, slipping into her car and driving out the gate and getting onto the freeway and feeling the openness of the road, that feeling of satisfaction. Or just getting onto a thought highway of anticipating something. It doesn't matter what the subject is. It's what you're wanting to identify and isolate is the feeling of satisfaction. Because if you haven't identified to yourself what it feels like, it might be looking at your child or your mate or somebody while they're sleeping. It might be making a flight, getting onto the flight and settling in your seat, knowing that the airline and the pilot are going to take care of it for the next 3 hours, and you just settle back and let them have their way with you. There are all kinds of ways that you can, and it's different for each one of you, but that is the process that we believe will give you the most bang for your buck. That's the process that we know for sure is the easiest one to accomplish, the easiest one to identify once you play with for a little bit, and then will net you the most vibrational momentum results. Here's the thing. So look at it this way, because it's softer than you think it is. So if you experience both sides of the equation, in other words, look at that infinity symbol and feel how it includes everything. Isn't the negative side of the equation as important as the positive side of the equation in order to help you focus? The piece that's essential is understanding the eternal, never-ending expansion. Start there. If expansion is absolute, freedom, growth, joy, you're so free you can choose bondage. Growth is, expansion is just going to happen. And joy is what you're reaching for. So if expansion is absolute, then doesn't that mean that what is must change? So all of your power lies in your willingness to let what is evolve to something more. But what keeps you from allowing what is to evolve to something more is your attention on what is. Because your attention on what is, everything's constantly changing, but if you're only focusing upon what is, then it's just changing to more of the same. So it's this willingness to accept the incompletion of what is and to be eager about the expansion of what must be. That's the mindset. And humans don't do a very good job of that because their reality for the most part is mostly about what they can see and hear and smell and taste and touch. So it's about the thoughts that have already turned to things, which is what is. If they're mostly or only thinking about the thoughts that have already turned to things, which is what is, then they don't let what's in the vibrational reality become, and then that's why they feel so much frustration. Doesn't that make perfect sense to you? So beating the drum of what is, talking about what is, holds you in a place of frustration at a minimum, where if you care about satisfaction, then you're opening the door for what is to evolve into more and more and more and more and more and more and more. Everything's becoming more. You just have to ask yourself, do you want satisfying things to become more or dissatisfying things to become more? Because you're getting what you're thinking about. You have an image of yourself that you hold. Your inner being has an image of yourself that your inner being holds. And when they are not in competition, that's when you're really flowing. Your inner being will never join you in your doubtful image of yourself. But you could join your inner being in your expectant image of yourself. It's not about thinking your way there. It's about feeling your way there. That's why we're talking right now about satisfaction, which is a feeling, rather than thinking about something, even though they go together. So you keep asking the same question and we keep giving you the same answer. In other words, we just keep coming around to the same thing. What is must evolve, which means you got to look other than what is. And so we know that when you want something, you activate the end of the stick of the desire. But at the same time that you activate the end of the stick of the desire, the other end of the stick activates too. And so now both ends of the stick of wanted and unwanted are sort of in competition with one another. But what we want you to understand is that the competition isn't even close because your inner being is in on this. And so it's really not necessary at all for you to be in protest or resistance to this really powerful leverage of energy flowing. So that's why we encourage, and we know you do too, quieting your mind. Because when you quiet your mind, all resistance ceases. And then who you really are dominates for just a little while. We've offered so many processes. The first one we offered was pivoting. When you know what you don't want, you know what you do want. When you know what you do want, you know what you don't want. So if you're thinking about what you don't want, that's when you most clearly know what you do want. So when you're thinking about what you don't want, instead ask yourself, what do I want? Well, I know what I don't want. What do I want? Well, if you're right here in this easy cusp of satisfied or not satisfied, then you can take that pivot. But if you are in agony and you want ecstasy, not one of you is going to be able to take that pivot. Law of attraction just won't let you loose of the momentum that you've got going. So the key to making the shift is you've got to figure out some way to stop the momentum that's moving in the direction that you don't want before you can start the momentum that's moving in the direction of what you do want. So you could technically pivot your way up the emotional scale. It'd be a hard slog, but you could do it. We could talk anyone from wherever they are into a place of feeling better. We would focus, we could just keep seeing it there, and we could lead someone in time, and you can too, you do it from time to time, you can bring them into a better feeling place. But it's so much easier for you to wake up in that better feeling place and go from there. One time, Jerry and Esther were out in Florida somewhere, and they had a new navigational system in their car, the first one that they had. And Esther was really determined to learn it, and Jerry wasn't so excited about it because he had been the navigator, and he sort of liked having the map and guiding them, and Esther had this new navigational system that she'd programmed. And so they're driving on a freeway in Orlando, and Jerry said to Esther, you know, we're going in exactly the opposite direction of the way we want to go. And Esther said, how can that be? I did exactly what Magellan told me to do. And Jerry said, well, maybe you did, but I'm just telling you, we're going in the opposite direction of where we want to go. And Esther said, well, how can that be? Because I programmed Magellan. Magellan knows where we are. Magellan knows where we want to go, has plotted the map. I did what Magellan said. How could that possibly be? And Jerry said, well, I don't know how it could possibly be, but we're going in exactly the opposite direction of where you want to go. And so Esther said, I've got a really good idea. Let's go back to where we started. I'll program it again. You watch with me, and we'll figure out whether it's a mistake in the programming or whether I just did something wrong. And Jerry said, or we could just start right where we are and go in the direction that we want to go. But humans, in your wanting to justify, you tend to want to go back and retrace your step and figure out what went wrong and hold yourself longer in the place that you don't want to be, when you could so easily just start right where you are and move in the direction of where you want to be. And so that's what our encouragement is. And you're in different places at different times on different subjects. Some subjects, it's really easy for you to feel good. Some subjects, it's more difficult. Some people you meet are in this moment not in a good place. Some of them are. But don't put them into categories where you assign why they're what they are. Don't say, well, you think like that because you're wrong and you belong to this group, and don't think like this because you're that way and you belong to that group. Instead, just acknowledge everybody is sometimes in alignment with their well-being, sometimes not in alignment. Sometimes people are allowing, sometimes people are resistant. It's true of every single person, all day, every day. You move in and out of allowance and resistance. But once, as an individual, you figure out which you're doing, and you've identified what it feels like when you do this, and what it feels like when you do this, what it feels like when you're moving in the direction of who you really are, and what it feels like when you're moving in opposition to who you really are. Then you come to this place where you don't judge yourself for those moments that you're out of alignment. You don't negatively judge yourself for being in a place of resistance or anger or negative emotion. Instead, you say, I'm having a step one moment. Contrast is really helping me to identify what I want. I'm more clear than I've ever been about what I do want. And I'll find a way to point in the direction of what I do want. And the universe will yield to me, as it always does, what I do want. And when you croak, which you all will do, we try to be as disrespectful of death as we can be, since there isn't any. When you make your transition into non-physical and you reemerge into non-physical, you will leave behind all doubt and fear and all resistance, and you will become a perfect blend of everything that you have already become. We just don't think you should have to croak to do that. We know how much fun it is to isolate it, identify it, and hold it, and do it on purpose, and then to witness with your own experience, with your eyes and ears and everything about you, to witness the unfolding of this creation that you've set into motion. To give up that needing to prove something to someone who's not asking for any proof, and instead to dovetail with all of these resources that are available for you. Your inner being is your co-creative partner. Your inner being didn't assign you some movement up the ladders of some scale in order to prove your readiness for something else. Your inner being's right there with you, showing the path to the next and the next and the next and the next. And the only criteria that your inner being uses in calling you is the criteria of joy. So just relax in that expectation and enjoy the flood of thoughts that's coming to you. You're ready for those thoughts to flow, so just enjoy them. Don't try to force them. Don't try to make them happen. Don't try to ask questions in the middle of it. Just let the thoughts flow.